My name is Ranger Callum Haynes, and I have worked in the North Rim District for 11 years, long enough to understand that most radio codes exist to keep panic off the airwaves. Code Blue means a visitor's in mild trouble. Code Red means we're dealing with an injury or a developing fire. But Code Black is the only call we are trained not to explain to the public. It has only one meaning, passed quietly from supervisor to ranger. Someone has vanished, and the situation suggests they are not coming back. I never expected I'd be the one to call it in. Certainly not on a day that began as simply as this one. That morning I left the station at 6:20. The light still low, the trees breathing out that damp, cold scent that always reminds me of unshaken sleep. The air felt heavier than usual, thicker, almost metallic, but it wasn't enough to trigger any concern. Weather patterns here shift like moods, you get used to it. What mattered was simple. 2 hikers overdue by 18 hours, last seen near Boundary Creek. A father and his 19-year-old son. Their car still sat in the parking lot, maps pinned under the windshield wiper, gear lists taped to the dashboard, everything the picture of preparation. And yet they weren't back. The missing persons board gave me their route, down the creek trail, across the ridge, looping back toward the northern basin. Nothing technically challenging, but the terrain can disorient even seasoned hikers if the cloud cover rolls in thick. My job was straightforward: run the loop, check for signs, call in status. The formulation was routine enough that I didn't pack anything extraordinary. Standard SAR pack, radio, trauma kit, reflective panel, water, and 2 extra bars. The creek was strangely quiet when I reached it. Usually you can hear the churn 50 yards out, but today it sounded muted, like someone had thrown a blanket across the whole landscape. That was the first oddity, though I didn't acknowledge it then. I started along the trail, eyes sweeping the edges for tracks, broken branches, anything. I found what looked promising a mile in, a partial boot impression pressed into wet soil, deep enough to show the heel. It matched the father's hiking profile. A second print followed, lighter, smaller. The son. They were together at least this far. I moved upstream, tracking the prints until they drifted off the trail toward the treeline. That alone wasn't concerning. People wander for better footing all the time. But the prints became erratic. One angled sharply. One stopped mid-stride like the person had paused or turned. I crouched, brushing my glove across the dirt, trying to reconstruct the motion in my mind. It looked like hesitation, confusion maybe, or something else. The trail narrowed as I pushed higher. The canopy thickened overhead, filtering out most of the daylight. I radioed in at 7:58, giving coordinates and route direction. Dispatch acknowledged. No urgency yet. 5 minutes later, I found the father's hat. It lay upside down between 2 exposed roots, clean, uncrushed, not torn. A gust could not have carried it here. I knelt, feeling the fabric. Dry. No dew. Which meant it hadn't been there long. I scanned for other signs, scuff marks, handprints, debris. Nothing. The forest floor looked undisturbed, almost unnaturally so. I marked the location and moved on, my pace slower, my senses dialed up. When you do this job long enough, you learn the difference between a search and a recovery. This still felt like a search, a puzzle yet to be solved, not a tragedy unfolding. But the trail was growing wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. A quarter mile later, the second oddity emerged. The son's jacket, bright blue nylon, hung neatly over a low branch, not snagged, not torn off, placed, arms draped evenly, zipper-centered. I stared at it longer than I should have. People shed layers under stress, yes, but they don't hang them like that. Not when they're lost, cold, or panicked. I called dispatch. North Rim, this is Haynes at Boundary Waypoint 7. I've located personal items belonging to the missing party. No sign of the individuals themselves. Continuing north. Copy. Any indication of injury? The operator asked. Negative. I hesitated. But the placement of items is unusual. Unusual how? I weighed my phrasing. Nothing triggers concern faster than saying something sounded wrong. They appear intentionally set. I'll update. I moved on. The ridge came into sight around 9:10, steep but manageable. The ground grew rockier, the vegetation sparse. The air felt even heavier now, pressing against my ribs. I checked elevation, hydration, pulse, everything normal. But that sense of pressure kept tightening, like altitude sickness without the altitude. Halfway up the ridge, I spotted something wedged between two stones. A trail marker ribbon. Yellow. SAR issue. I hadn't placed it. No ranger had reported placing it. And the worst part, it's not pattern matched the station's training model for found path markers left by subjects. But no missing hiker in this region would know that pattern. They only appear in ranger manuals. I bent down, examining it, and for the first time in years on this job, a cold thrum moved across my back. Someone had marked this route. Someone who shouldn't know how. Someone who was ahead of me. I called dispatch again. And this time, when the operator answered, her voice sounded thinner, tense. Haynes, be advised. Another unit just filed a report near Basin Overlook. She paused. Callum. They found the father. A silent beat stretched between us. Found? I asked quietly. As in, not injured, not deceased. Another pause. He was alone, disoriented, and he keeps repeating the same sentence. What sentence? She exhaled like she didn't want to say it. He says, my son walked ahead, and then he wasn't walking anymore. The ridge wind pressed against my face. My stomach sank, because I was tracking the son's footprints uphill. And if the father's account was accurate, the boy should be only a few yards ahead of me. But the trail was empty, and nothing moved. The moment dispatch finished speaking, the forest felt like it tightened around me. Not in a dramatic way. Nothing supernatural, nothing cinematic. Just the subtle but unmistakable sensation that every sound had been dialed down, leaving only my breathing and the faint scrape of gravel shifting under my boots. I forced myself to stay methodical. Panic wastes daylight, and daylight is the most valuable resource in a single-day search. Haynes, do you copy? Dispatch asked. I clicked the mic copy, continuing toward the ridge crest. Advise if father becomes coherent enough for route clarification. Understood. I kept climbing. The trail curled around a bend of shattered limestone, each stone pale and sharp like broken teeth. The sun's footprints had grown lighter, the soil thinning beneath them. A few prints showed slight drag marks, as if he'd been slowing down or stumbling. I crouched low, photographing each one with my ranger cam, logging the time and location. I wasn't scared yet. Concerned, yes. Alert, absolutely. But fear doesn't set in until the pattern breaks. And the pattern broke 30 feet farther. The prints simply stopped. I'm not exaggerating. They ended mid-stride, on open ground with no rock outcrops, no boulders, no roots to step onto. One moment the kid was walking, slightly unstable. The next, nothing. Not even a partial heel impression. No return tracks. No lateral drift. No signs of a jump, fall, or animal encounter. Just termination. I ran a gloved hand over the ground, checking for disturbances, depressions, impact scars. The soil was undisturbed, flat, clean. When someone turns off a trail, they leave patterns, pivot points, weight shifts, widening arcs. I saw none. Dispatch, I need a status on canine teams, I said. Closest team is 90 minutes out. Understood. Logging anomaly at ridge marker 4. Subject's prints end abruptly. No sign of diversion. I avoided the word vanish. It's not a professional word. I took a steadying breath and scanned my surroundings. The ridge before me sloped upward another 20 yards before reaching a narrow crest line. Beyond that, the basin dropped sharply into a dense grid of pines. The sun had risen higher, but the air felt colder. Not crisp, not refreshing, but stagnant, like air in a sealed room. I walked to the crest. At first I didn't see the object on the rocks. Then the wind shifted, and sunlight caught the reflective strip on the back. It was the boy's pack, positioned upright, balanced, leaning carefully against a stone fin, as though someone had adjusted it until it stood perfectly. The straps were buckled. That is not something a panicked, dehydrated, disoriented person does. People in trouble rip packs off. They don't stage them. My heartbeat kicked up, but I stayed controlled. I photographed everything, angles, lighting, distance, orientation, then stepped closer. The pack was empty, not emptied in haste, not yanked open, not rummaged. All compartments unzipped symmetrically. Inside, nothing. I called dispatch again. North Rim, be advised. I've located the son's backpack. Empty. Placement appears deliberate. She didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice had changed. Haynes. Supervisor Marsh wants you to maintain visual line of sight and avoid descending into the basin until backup reaches you. That's 90 minutes, I reminded her. Affirmative. What's the rationale? Another pause. Haynes, the father's condition deteriorated. He's repeating additional statements, such as, he keeps saying the son was right there, and then not in the world anymore. He's not making sense. But Marsh wants you to exercise caution. I stared at the empty pack and tried to square the situation into something logical. People do irrational things when distressed. They wander off. They strip layers. They misinterpret. They panic. But nothing here followed the patterns we study. Nothing aligned. I wasn't ready to call code black, but I was close enough to feel the words forming. I waited, scanning the basin. The trees below shifted gently with the wind. Nothing else moved. No animals. No hikers. No debris. A raven cried once, sharp and distant, like a metal hinge snapping. The radio crackled softly. Callum? The voice belonged to Ranger Diaz, a colleague and friend assigned to the Southern Overlook. Heard you've got an odd one. I'm rerouting to your position. ETA 60 minutes. Copy, I said, grateful for the reinforcement. You armed? He asked. Standard issue. No threats identified. Doesn't matter. Keep a hand near it. I didn't reply. He knew I heard him. I continued to document the area until something caught my eye further downslope. A thin, almost invisible line of disturbed pine needles. It led from the rocks into the trees, faint but traceable. Not footprints, not drag marks, just the subtle compression that occurs when something light moves through. A deer could do that. A lost hiker could too, but only if they walked carefully enough to avoid clear prints. No one missing for 18 hours walks carefully. Still, I followed the line. Slowly, deliberately, the ground dipped into the first row of pines, shadow enveloping me as if I'd stepped into a colder temperature zone. I looked back once to make sure I could still see the ridge crest. Could for now. 10 paces in, the air changed. Not colder, not warmer, just wrong, as though the humidity had shifted only in the space around my shoulders. A slight dampness brushed my ear, like breath. I turned quickly. No one, no sound, just the faint rustle of needles settling. I forced myself forward. A uniform path of disturbed needles continued ahead, leading deeper. I kept logging, analyzing, staying objective. 50 feet in, the trees began to space out again, allowing shafts of light to break through. And that's where I saw it. A glove. The sun's glove, I assumed. Navy fabric, lying palm up, fingers curled inwards. But more important, there was a mark in the soil beside it. Not a footprint, not an animal print, just a single line. A line straight down, impossibly narrow, as though a metal rod had pressed lightly into the earth and then lifted clean away. I knelt, measuring it. 6 inches long. Uniform depth. Edges sharply defined. That thrum I'd ignored earlier moved through me again. Because nothing in nature makes marks like that. And no missing hiker carries equipment to do it. I radioed dispatch, slow, deliberate, controlled. North Rim, this is Haynes. Go ahead. I am formally requesting permission to elevate to code black parameters. She didn't respond for nearly 10 seconds. When she did, I heard paper shuffling. A supervisor's voice in the background. Urgency entering the room. Callum, hold position, she said. Supervisor Marsh is joining the call. That's when I realized this wasn't going to be a normal search anymore. Ranger Haynes, this is Supervisor Marsh. Confirm you are safe and stationary. His voice was calm, but not the usual composed calm. This was the tone he used when something was already unfolding behind the scenes. Confirmed, I said. I've halted at grid reference 14B. I've located multiple staged items belonging to the missing subject. No sign of the individual. Ground anomalies present. What type of anomalies? A termination of footprints with no transition, I said, keeping my voice steady. A deliberately placed pack. And a linear ground impression inconsistent with natural features or human tools. A silence followed, brief but heavy. All right, Marsh said. You are authorized to proceed under Code Black preconditions until Diaz arrives. Maintain line of sight to an exit route at all times. Do not descend further if visual contact is lost. That was as close as the National Park Service gets to saying, something is wrong, and you are now operating under risk protocol. Copy, I said, though my throat felt tight. And Callum, do not attempt solo extraction of the missing subject if recovered. Wait for backup. Understood. That order chilled me more than the forest air. Understood. I clicked off the radio and took a slow breath, letting the stillness settle. The pine needles were motionless. Even the wind seemed to have paused. I turned back toward the line of disturbed needles, the faint trail leading deeper into the basin. I kept the ridge in my periphery, careful not to lose orientation. The sun had shifted west just enough to start casting longer shadows. One more reminder that daylight, even this early in the afternoon, moves faster than you think. I followed the path another 15 feet. The canopy here blocked enough light that my eyes had to adjust. The air was stale, as if nothing had circulated in this small patch of forest for hours. My boot nudged something soft. I looked down. Another item. A small field notebook, waterproof, ranger style. But not mine, not park issued. I picked it up using gloves. The cover had a smear of dirt, but no tears, no moisture intrusion. When I opened it, the first several pages were blank except for faint pressure lines, like someone had written hard on a page before tearing it out. I flipped forward. On page 7, a sentence appeared, scrawled in jagged handwriting. I didn't want to leave the trail. Something pulled at me, not physically, just wrong. The signature wasn't there. The ink was fresh. I felt something in my chest shift. Not fear exactly, but a kind of anticipatory dread, the realization that whatever this boy experienced, it wasn't a typical case of disorientation. People don't describe sensations like that unless their stress level is at a breaking point. I turned the page. Another line. If someone finds this, tell my dad I wasn't trying to get ahead of him. I thought I saw a ranger. My breath caught. There were no other rangers assigned here this morning. I flipped to the next page. Blank. Next page. Blank. The rest of the notebook was empty. I logged the finding, photographed each page, then sealed the notebook in an evidence pouch. That was when I heard the first sound since entering the basin. A single, brittle snap. Not the weighty crack of a branch. Something lighter, precise. I turned sharply, scanning the trees. My hand drifted toward my sidearm in pure instinct. No movement. No shadow shift. Nothing. Still, the feeling intensified. The sense that the air was pushing inward, pressing against my skin. My rational mind kept fighting it, insisting humidity fluctuation, thermal pocket, psychological stress. But my instincts, those sharpened by years in the field, told me something was off in a way that data couldn't capture. I continued deeper. Only another 10 feet. Enough to maintain the ridge behind me in clear view. I kneeled to examine the ground. The soil was loose here, fine granules with a reddish tint. Not typical for this section. It looked disturbed recently, maybe hours ago. I dug lightly with my fingers. A piece of fabric emerged. I brushed it free. The son's shirt, torn at one sleeve but not violently. More like it snagged on something small. But what unsettled me wasn't the damage. It was the way the shirt was folded beneath the soil. Not crushed, not balled, folded, as if buried deliberately, but lightly, like someone didn't want it lost, just hidden. I felt a faint tremor in the ground then. Not seismic, not structural, just a vibration too subtle to measure, more sensed than felt. It lasted a single second. I froze. Another brittle sound echoed off to the right, like a pine needle snapping under minimal pressure. I stood slowly, letting my eyes adjust again, letting every detail settle into position. The ridge behind me remained visible, but the sun angle was shifting fast. Shadows deepened between the trunks. I backed up 2 steps, unwilling to lose spatial orientation. My boot caught on a root. I steadied myself, and that's when I saw another mark. Not on the ground. On a tree, 6 feet up. A thin vertical scratch, crisp-edged, too straight to be made by an animal. It was recent. Lighter wood exposed beneath the bark like it had been cut mere hours ago. I reached up, measuring the height relative to my own shoulder. A grown man could make that mark. A 19-year-old boy could too, if he used a knife or tool. Except his pack was empty, his gear missing. I heard another soft crack. Closer this time. This wasn't wildlife. I'd grown up tracking elk migrations, monitoring bear activity, cataloging cougar movement. Animals don't move like this. Precise, measured, sound without presence. Something was here, but nothing presented itself visually. The radio crackled suddenly. I nearly flinched. Haynes, this is Diaz. I'm 20 minutes out. Keep talking if you can. Copy, I said, voice low but even, noting additional anomalies. Maintain speed. You're still stationary, right? Diaz asked. I hesitated, not long, but long enough that he heard it. Callum, he said, tone sharpening. Don't go deeper. I exhaled. I'm maintaining visual to the ridge. But something is. A third sound. Not a crack. Not a rustle. A soft, controlled exhale. Human. I turned toward it. 10 yards ahead, between 2 close-standing pines, something shifted behind the bark. Just a brief compressing of shadow, subtle enough to question whether it happened at all. My pulse surged. My breathing thinned. Diaz, I whispered into the radio. There's movement in the basin. What kind of movement? I swallowed. Human. Possibly. The shadow contracted again, like someone leaning slightly forward. I kept my voice steady, but inside, my instincts screamed for distance. Diaz? I said quietly, hurry, because the shape between the trees wasn't approaching. It was waiting, and whatever it wasn't making any mistakes. The shape between the trees didn't move again, but the stillness around it felt intentional. I tracked enough people, lost, frightened, injured, to know the difference between someone who doesn't want to reveal themselves and someone who is deciding whether to. I shifted my stance, grounding my weight, trying not to project threat. The radio stayed in my left hand, thumb near the call button. My right hand hovered inches from my holster. Not touching it yet, because the moment you touch a weapon, you escalate the interaction. North Rim, this is Haynes. Possible visual on subject, I said softly, eyes fixed on the darkness between the trunks. Distance approximately 30 feet. Stationary, unclear posture. Dispatch answered almost immediately. Copy. Diaz is 19 minutes out. Maintain distance. The shape wavered again. Just a subtle sway, like someone shifting their balance. No sound accompanied the movement. That was wrong. Dry pine needles should crunch even under light weight. I tried to interpret it through the lens of training. Disoriented subject, frightened, in shock. People freeze in place when threatened or confused. They sometimes hide, but they don't hide like this. They don't hold their breath so completely that the air itself feels suspended. I adjusted my angle, widening my stance, slowly reaching for my flashlight. Clicked it on. A narrow beam cut through the dimness. It hit the tree trunks but not the shape between them. The shadow remained oddly opaque. I took one cautious step forward. The shape vanished. Not disappeared, vanished in the natural way shadows do when angle and light shift. A trick of perspective. When my beam moved across the bark again, I finally saw something solid. A branch. A simple, dark, slightly curved branch leaning diagonally. My chest tightened. Not out of fear, but out of embarrassment at myself. Shadows have fooled better rangers than me. Stress sharpens instincts, but sometimes distorts them too. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and swept the flashlight across the forest floor. No footprints, no movement, just trees in every direction. False alarm, I murmured quietly, not into the radio, just a branch. Still, the tension in my shoulders didn't ease. I turned back toward the ridge to reestablish orientation, and froze. The ridge was still visible, but the light had shifted farther than it should have in the time I'd been here. Shadows stretched long, thin, segmented across the ground. I checked my watch. 13:42. Still hours until sunset, but the basin felt dimmer, like cloud cover thickened overhead without warning. I scanned upward. Thin cirrus clouds stretched across the sky, nothing dense enough to cause this much dimming. My brain filed it under microclimate anomalies. Deep basins do strange things with light. I documented enough to know it wasn't impossible. But the timing felt inconveniently precise. I radioed in again. Dispatch, be advised. Light levels dropping faster than expected, probably atmospheric. Continuing to hold position. Copy, dispatch said. Medical team reports the father's vitals are stable. He's repeating fewer statements. Any new info? I asked. A pause. Yes, she said finally. He keeps asking if you're alone. That made something cold unfurl inside me. I kept my eyes on the treeline. Did he say why? No. He just repeats it over and over. Is the ranger alone? Tell him not to be alone. I didn't respond. I didn't know how to. I swept the area once more before shifting slightly forward. enough to inspect the disturbed pine needle line again. The pattern was consistent. Faint, evenly spaced, as though someone stepped with purposeful lightness. But who does that? Lost hikers don't tiptoe. And if someone was following the boy or leading him, they should have left prints. Weight distribution, soil displacement, sign. None of it can vanish. Unless the person moving was significantly lighter or extremely practiced. I crouched, checking angles, entry points, nearby bark for scrape marks. Nothing. The only new sign was a single pine needle resting across the disturbed path at a contradictory angle. It shouldn't be on top unless the disturbance was older than I thought. But the notebook pages were fresh, and the pack had been placed this morning at the earliest. I took another slow breath. "Diaz," I said into the radio. "What's your distance?" 12 minutes, he answered. "You still good?" "Yes, but I'd prefer not to stay in this basin longer than needed." "Copy that," he said. "Keep your eyes open. I'm coming in fast." I straightened up and scanned again, widening my awareness. The forest was quiet, unnaturally so. Even the insects seemed muted. I didn't like how the silence felt. It wasn't calm. It was anticipatory, like the woods themselves were bracing for something. I took a careful step backward and stopped. Something had changed. Another item lay on the ground behind me, directly behind where I'd stood minutes earlier. A map, folded in half, crisp edges, clearly placed, not dropped. I bent slowly, lifted it with gloved fingers. It wasn't the boys'. It was ours. A standard-issue topographic map of the North Rim District, the kind stored at the ranger station, not something issued to visitors unless they purchase it. The paper still smelled faintly of cedar and ink. No dirt, no moisture. Someone brought this from a protected indoor environment. My pulse kicked harder. Inside the fold was a circle drawn in black marker. A circle right over this exact basin. And under it, in block letters, "Don't stay." I didn't wait. I turned toward the ridge, ready to move, ready to get out while still maintaining compliance with Code Black procedures. And that's when I heard it. A voice, faint, strained, human. "Ranger?" It came from somewhere deeper in the basin. A voice that sounded like a boy trying very hard not to cry. My whole body locked. The missing son, or someone who wanted me to believe that. For a moment I didn't move. My training insisted on caution. Voices travel strangely through uneven terrain. A sound that seems close can be dozens of yards away. A sound that seems human can be distorted wind. But this voice was too clear, too intentional. The tone matched someone fighting panic, someone forcing volume through a tight throat. "Ranger? Please." I raised the radio. "Dispatch, I have potential audio contact with the missing subject." Male voice, adolescent, direction uncertain. Request triangulation from Diaz's approach. "Copy," dispatch said. "Hold position. Diaz is 10 minutes out." I didn't reply immediately. I was trying to locate the direction of the sound. It echoed faintly between trunks, bouncing, diffusing. I took a slow step forward, but only one. I needed the ridge visible. I needed a way out. "Ranger, I'm here." My heartbeat shifted into something sharper. The voice wasn't a scream or a cry. It was deliberate, controlled, as if spoken by someone exhausted but aware enough to call for help strategically. "Dispatch," I said. Voice appears to be approximately 30 to 50 yards ahead, but echo distortion present. "Advise Diaz to shift north-northeast on approach." "Copy. Hold position." I wanted to. I really did. But something about the boy's tone gnawed under my ribs. People near collapse sometimes speak like that. Tight, measured, conserving energy. The temperature was dropping. Exposure could already be setting in. I took another step forward. A second voice reached me. Not a duplicate, not an echo. A faint, almost breathless whisper of the first. Ranger! I stopped instantly. Two voices. One real, one not. Not supernatural, just not coming from a human throat. The second voice was thinner, reedy, stretched in the way wind stretches noise. But the timing was too precise. The moment the real voice ended, the faint imitation followed. I backed up a step. "Dispatch," I said quietly. "I have duplicate audio imitations occurring. One human, one environmental." "Environmental?" she repeated. "That's the closest term I can give. It's not a second subject." Another pause on her end, the kind where people exchange looks in a control room. "Haynes, Diaz is 6 minutes out. Do not advance further." "Understood." But the boy's voice broke again. Louder this time, edged with fear. "Please, I'm stuck." My chest tightened. Stuck could mean physically trapped, wedged, pinned, caught between rocks. Time-sensitive if circulation was compromised. The code black warnings warred with the ranger instinct drilled into my bones. I moved forward, but slowly, measuredly, marking each footfall, memorizing the angle back to the ridge. I would not descend into terrain I couldn't escape. The ground dipped slightly as I proceeded deeper, no more than a gradual slope, but enough to shift perspective. Visibility reduced. Tree spacing tightened. The voice came again, closer, unmistakably human. "Please, please." That kind of plea only comes from someone in real distress. It wasn't staged. It wasn't deliberate. It was the cry of a teenager who had been alone for too long. I scanned every angle, listening for the faint imitation, but it didn't follow this time. Only silence after the boy's words. I advanced another yard, then another. Finally, I saw movement. Not shadow, not a trick of light. A leg. A human leg partially visible behind a fallen log. The denim darkened with soil and what looked like moisture. My breath caught, not from fear but from relief. "I see him," I said into the radio. "Subject located. Approximately 25 yards ahead. Approaching with caution." "Wait for Diaz," dispatch urged. "No visible threats," I said, already moving. "And potential entrapment. Proceeding." I stepped around a cluster of young pines, clearing my line of sight. The boy lay on his side, one knee bent awkwardly beneath him, his left foot pinned under the edge of the downed log. His face was pale, streaked with dirt, eyes glassy but aware. He looked dehydrated, exhausted, but alive. "Ranger!" he croaked when he saw me, relief flooding his features. "It's okay," I said, dropping to a knee. "I'm Callum. You're safe now. I've got you." He released a shaky breath, a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh. "My leg," he whispered. "I think it's stuck." "I see it," I said gently. "We'll get you free." I stabilized his knee and ankle, assessing position. The log had shifted just enough to trap him, but not enough to crush the bone. Lucky. He must have stumbled or crawled here, desperate for rest. His breathing was shallow, early hypothermia signs present. I began the extraction protocol, checking for vertebral strain, applying minimal upward pressure. "You're doing great," I murmured. He nodded weakly. "Where's your dad?" I asked. He blinked slowly, confused. He was behind me. Then I don't know. I got turned around." "Okay," I said. "Don't think about that right now." His breathing hitched. "I didn't mean to leave him. I thought I saw." He stopped. I looked up. "You thought you saw what?" His eyes unfocused slightly, as if trying to remember a shape that made no sense to him. "A ranger," he whispered. But it wasn't you. I swallowed hard. Before I could ask more, a sound cut through the trees. Footsteps. Fast. Approaching. I stood immediately, placing myself between the boy and the sound, hand hovering near my holster. Diaz, I called. No answer. The footsteps slowed, then stopped. Somewhere behind the closest tree line, too close. The boy's hand clenched around my sleeve. Don't let it come back, he whispered. And before I could ask him what it meant, something stepped into view. What emerged from the trees wasn't a creature or an apparition or anything sensational. It was a man, a very real, very human man. He was wearing a deep green jacket, civilian, not park-issued, dirty around the cuffs and knees. His face was unshaven, eyes sunken, expression blank in a way that sent a ripple of unease through me. His boots were caked with mud, mud that should have left prints. He stood 10 yards away, posture loose but alert, not swaying, not stumbling. His gaze locked directly onto me. No fear, no confusion, just a cold, evaluating stillness. Sir, I said evenly, this is an active rescue scene. Identify yourself. He didn't answer. His breathing was calm, too calm. Are you injured? I tried again, projecting authority. Do you need assistance? Nothing. His eyes flicked once toward the boy behind me, an almost imperceptible shift, and something in that moment made every instinct I had ignite. This man wasn't lost. He wasn't confused. He was watching, predatory watching. I slowly reached toward my radio. Dispatch, I have an adult male on site. Non-responsive. Not the missing father. Approximately mid-40s. Not identifying. The man tilted his head sharply at the sound of my voice. Not curiosity, more like irritation. His jaw clenched. His hands curled slightly at his sides. The boy behind me whimpered. Ranger, he whispered. That's who I followed. I thought he was you. Cold washed across my shoulders. I raised my free hand toward the man, palm outward. Sir, stay where you are. Help is on the way. He blinked once, slowly. Then he spoke. His voice was flat, dry, emotionless. You shouldn't be here. I felt the boy flinch behind me. Why not? I asked, keeping my tone steady. He didn't answer. Instead, he took a step forward. Just one. But that one step was enough. Stop, I ordered, my hand shifting closer to my weapon. Do not come any closer. He stopped. His expression didn't change. His breathing didn't change. His body language didn't reveal fear, defiance, or comprehension. He simply stood still, watching, waiting. Sir, I said, if you need assistance, I can help you. But you cannot interfere with the rescue. A beat, two. Then he said it again in the same flat tone. You shouldn't be here. Why? I pressed. He inhaled slightly, not deeply, just enough to speak. It only takes one. A chill slid down my spine. One what? His eyes flicked again to the boy, then back to me. It only takes one, he repeated, slower this time, as if each word had weight. What does that mean? I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned. Not abruptly, not with any sign of panic. He simply rotated his body and began walking away. Calm, steady, deliberate steps deeper into the basin. Sir, I called. Stop. You are required to remain on scene. He didn't stop. He didn't look back. He just kept walking. And that's when Diaz burst through the tree line behind me. Breath sharp, boots crunching on pine needles. Callum, you good? I didn't take my eyes off the retreating man. Unknown adult male. Not compliant. Heading northeast. Diaz followed my gaze and stiffened. Who the hell is that? No idea. Should we pursue? Protocol said no. Pursuing an unknown individual in restricted terrain without backup was against Code Black guidelines. But letting a potential suspect walk away, everything inside me nodded. Hold, I said finally. We secure the boy first. Then we track him. Diaz nodded, though tension radiated off him. We turned back to the boy. His breathing was rapid now, panic rising again. Is he gone? He whispered. For now, I said. Diaz crouched to help me assess the leg. With combined force, we lifted the log just enough to free him. The boy cried out but held steady. We eased his foot out, checked circulation. No break, just a deep strain and swelling. Call for medevac, I said. He won't make the hike out. Diaz radioed in coordinates while I stabilized the boy's leg with a soft splint. His eyes kept darting to the direction the man had gone. He watched me, the boy murmured shakily. He kept standing in the trees. Every time I moved, he moved, but not like a person. Like he knew where I was going before I did. I exchanged a quick look with Diaz. Could he have been stalking you? I asked. Yes, the boy whispered. But that's not the worst part. Tell me. He never left footprints. My breath stalled. You're sure? I asked. Yes. I kept looking. I thought maybe he was floating or something stupid like that. But he was just walking. Walking without leaving anything behind. Diaz swallowed hard. Callum. The father said something similar. I frowned. What did he say? He said the thing following them wasn't heavy enough. Like it didn't fully touch the ground. The forest around us went still again. Not quiet, still. Like the air was listening. I stood up slowly. Diaz, I said. Keep the boy stable. I'm going after the man. He grabbed my arm. Callum, protocol. I know protocol, I said. But that man knows this basin. And he led the kid here for a reason. Diaz hesitated, conflict tearing across his face. Then he let go. Be careful, he said. I nodded, turned toward the tree line the man had vanished into, and froze. There, on the ground, a single fresh mark. A line, perfectly straight, 6 inches long, just like the one beside the glove. But this one was deeper, as if whatever made it was waiting for me. For a long second, I just stared at that mark in the soil. Straight, clean-edged, 6 inches again. The depth told me something had pressed down hard. Hard enough to shift compacted earth, but not enough to crack roots or dislodge stones. Something deliberate, something controlled. Footprints are irregular. Human movement is messy by nature. But this was a mark of intention. Not a tool scrape, not an animal track, not wind or water erosion. The man had walked through here, and this was all he left. Diaz, I said quietly. I'm moving into the northeast tree line. Keep eyes on the boy. Notify medevac of potential suspect presence. I don't like this, Diaz muttered. You go more than 70 yards. I'm coming after you with or without authorization. Fair, I said. 30 yards only. I'm not leaving visual of a retreat path. I stepped into the trees. Every sense I had sharpened. My hearing tuned to every brittle snap. My eyes flicked between layers of depth. Foreground, midground, distant trunks. My boots were loud compared to the silence here. Heavy, obvious. The man's footsteps hadn't sounded like this. His movement had been quieter than it should have been for someone his size. I kept my pace controlled, slow. The forest floor was soft, moss-covered in places, pine needles layering in dry patches. My own prints were distinct, easy to follow. The suspects should have stood out, but nothing broke the surface ahead. No heel dips, no toe scrapes, no drag marks, just those straight, singular impressions. One every 10 or 15 feet. I reached the second one. Same length, same depth, same orientation. Each mark pointed slightly left of the next, like he was weaving, not lost, but plotting a route. I checked my watch. 14:03. Medevac would be 25 minutes out. Plenty of time if nothing went sideways. A sound drifted through the trees then. Not footsteps, not speech. Breathing. Slow. Even. Somewhere ahead. I froze behind a trunk, leaning my shoulder into the bark. The breathing continued. Not ragged. Not frightened. Not winded. Calm. Measured. Too steady for someone moving through the brush. I crept forward another yard. The breathing stopped. The forest went still again. The same oppressive stillness from earlier. Not mute, just stagnant. Like the air was holding something in suspension. Then a voice. Not loud. Not panicked. Just spoken clearly. Ranger Haynes. My name. My full name. My gut pulled tight. Not because of menace, but because the tone wasn't threatening. It wasn't angry or taunting. It was almost conversational, like someone calling across a campsite. I stepped into a slight clearing. The man stood 15 yards ahead. He faced sideways, not looking directly at me, as though observing something off in the distance. His posture was relaxed. His hands were unclenched. His shoulders neutral. I raised my voice, crisp and professional. Sir, stop moving and identify yourself. He did not turn. Instead, he spoke softly. You followed the boy's route. That wasn't wise. My hand hovered near my sidearm. Are you responsible for his injuries? Quiet moment. Then, he followed me first. That set every alarm in my head ringing. Why? I asked. He inhaled slightly, like he was tasting the air. People follow whatever they think will help them, even when it won't. Sir, I said, tightening my stance, I need you to turn around slowly. He didn't. He simply said, the boy is alive because he is light. Not everyone is. What does that mean? He finally turned his head, not fully, just enough that I saw one eye. Dark, focused, intelligent. Wait, he said. Weighs you down. Makes you sink. My pulse jumped. Sinking where? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked at the ground between us, at the soil, at the scattered pine needles, at the exact line where my own footprints overlapped his straight impressions. Where things go, he said. That was vague enough to be meaningless, but the tone wasn't mystical. It wasn't delirious rambling. It was practical, factual, like he was describing a hazard. Sir, I repeated, I am ordering you to stay where you are. Put your hands where I can see them. He didn't move his hands at all. You need to leave this basin. Are you armed? No. Are you lost? No. Are you looking for help? No. He finally turned fully toward me then, and his expression made the hair on my neck stand up. He wasn't threatening me. He was warning me. You shouldn't be here, Ranger, he said again. It doesn't take both of you. Both of who? He looked past me, not over my shoulder, to the ground behind me, to my footprints. Something primal flared in my nerves. Then he said softly, You're too heavy. Before I could respond, before I could take a step or raise my weapon, he bolted, not toward me, not toward the ridge, straight into deeper trees, silent, fast, gone within seconds. I sprinted forward to pursue, but the instant I crossed the clearing's midpoint, the ground vibrated beneath my boots, just a faint shudder, like something shifting deep under the surface. I stopped on instinct, looked down. A new mark was forming, right under my foot. Slow, straight, Clean. 6 inches. I stepped back fast. The ground stabilized. My breathing didn't. I radioed immediately. Diaz. Something's happening in here. What kind of something? I don't know yet, but bring the boy out now. Do not wait for medevac. Copy. Moving. I turned back toward the clearing the man had run into. He was gone, but the forest didn't feel empty. It felt like something was waiting for me to make a mistake. I backed away slowly, retracing every step. No more marks appeared. But one thing was certain now. The man hadn't been lost. He had been guiding paths, testing them, looking for something specific. And when he looked at my footprints, he found it. I moved quickly but carefully back toward where Diaz and the boy waited. Every few yards I checked the ground behind me, making sure no new marks appeared. Nothing changed. The soil remained still, but the awareness, the pressure, remained like a hand resting lightly between my shoulder blades. I spotted Diaz through the trees, crouched beside the boy, prepping him for transport. Relief hit me so sharply I almost sagged with it. Human presence in an environment like this feels like a rope thrown across a chasm. "You're back fast," Diaz said, voice tight. "What happened?" "Not now," I said, kneeling beside the boy. "We need to move." Diaz hesitated. "Callum, I'll brief you once we're uphill," I said. "We're not staying in this basin." The boy's breathing quickened. "He's still here. Doesn't matter," I said gently. "You're getting out." Diaz slung the boy's arm over his shoulders while I stabilized the other side. We started up the gradual slope, following the faint opening back toward the ridge. The boy winced with every step, but he kept moving. His determination surprised me. Shock and strain usually flatten people, but he wanted out desperately. Behind us, the forest stayed unervingly quiet. At 30 yards in, I paused to catch my breath and check orientation. I scanned the ground out of habit. That's when I saw it. A mark, 6 inches, directly across our outbound path. Fresh. Diaz hadn't stepped on it. I hadn't stepped on it. The boy's injured leg certainly hadn't made it. Something had been here between our inbound and outbound passes. The mark aligned perpendicular to our path, as if blocking it. Diaz saw my expression. "Callum, talk to me." "Keep moving," I said. "Stay in my footsteps. Avoid stepping outside them." "That's not reassuring." "It's the best instruction I've got." We pushed forward. The ridge came into view through the trees, faint sunlight reflecting off pale rock. We were maybe 60 yards away when the boy stumbled. His injured leg buckled beneath him and he crumpled to one knee, letting out a choked cry. Diaz swore and knelt beside him. "Easy, easy, breathe." "I can't," the boy gasped. "It hurts. Just give me a second." We crouched around him, shielding him from wind and shock. I scanned the treeline while Diaz assessed the knee again. 3 seconds passed. 4. Then I saw something, not movement, a shape, standing far between the trunks, deep in the basin we just left. A man-shaped silhouette, still, watching. My stomach folded in on itself. Diaz followed my gaze. "Is that him?" "Yes," I said. "Why is he just standing there?" I didn't answer. I didn't know. The boy whispered, trembling. He kept doing that, over and over. When I moved, he stopped. When I stopped, he watched. I swallowed hard. "All right. Now." We got him up again, supporting his weight. He clung to us, gritting his teeth, dragging his good foot forward. The ridge grew closer. 40 yards. 30. 25. The sunlight felt warmer here. More real. More attainable. I kept glancing back. The silhouette remained exactly where it was. Not advancing. Not retreating. just watching. I didn't like that. Haynes, Diaz said quietly. I keep thinking something's off. Everything is off, I said. Move. We reached the ridge lip at last, stepping onto rock that felt unmistakably solid. The air thinned out of that suffocating pressure. The boy inhaled deeply, even the way he breathed changed. When his boots hit the rock, his whole body loosened. Relief washed over his features like someone had just freed him from invisible restraints. Diaz exhaled. Thank God. We set the boy down gently, propped against a boulder. I looked back one last time. The silhouette was gone. Good, or not good. It was hard to tell which. He followed me here, the boy whispered. All night, all morning. He never came close, just stayed far away, waiting. Waiting for what? Diaz asked. The boy's eyes filled with something I didn't like seeing in someone so young. For me to make a mistake. I turned sharply. What mistake? He looked at my boots, then at the basin, then at the ground between the two. Slowly, he whispered, stepping somewhere we shouldn't. I felt the meaning settle in my chest like a dropped stone. Diaz caught my eye. Callum, do you think he's causing the disappearances? We don't know that, I said carefully. But you think he's connected? Yes. How? I don't know yet. But I did know something. The man wasn't disoriented. He wasn't wandering. He wasn't confused. He was assessing. Who walked where? Who weighed what? Who mattered? Who didn't? I radioed dispatch. Subject located and stable. Preparing for extraction. Unknown adult male remains in area. Approach with caution. Copy, dispatch said, relief evident. Diaz helped the boy sit more comfortably. I stepped a few yards away to breathe, to think, to ground myself. That's when my boot hit something rigid. I looked down. A second map, folded neatly, identical to the first. I knelt and opened it. Another circle, this time drawn around a different location. The ridge, right where we stood, and below it written in the same hand, not both of you. The wind shifted slightly, and at that moment, I realized something terrifyingly simple. The man wasn't chasing us. He was choosing. For several seconds, I just stared at that message. Not both of you. Was it a threat? A warning? Prediction? I didn't know, but it made something inside me cold and very still. I folded the map quickly and slipped it into an evidence pouch before Diaz saw the writing. He was busy helping the boy drink water from his canteen, checking for shock. The boy's eyes drifted toward the basin again, fear tight around the edges of his expression. He kept searching the tree-line, scanning for movement. Callum, Diaz said. I don't see him anymore. I know, I said. You think he's gone? No. We both knew predators don't always pursue. Sometimes they withdraw to observe, to reposition, to wait. But we weren't prey. We were rangers. We had training. We had protocols. We had backup coming. What we didn't have was time. Medevac called in over the radio. Bird 4 minutes out. That would get the boy out of here. Then Diaz and I could deal with the man. We could track him, identify him, detain him if necessary. But then, a crack sounded behind us. Not loud, just enough. I turned sharply, scanning the ridge line. Nothing. Probably a squirrel, Diaz said, though his voice wasn't confident. I took 2 steps toward the sound. The soil here was thin over stone. Nothing soft enough to leave footprints or marks. That should have comforted me. Didn't. I crouched, looked closer. Right at the edge of the rock plate. A mark. Straight. 6 inches. Fresh. My breath stalled. Diaz, I whispered. Get the boy behind me. He moved instantly, pulling the boy back. shielding him. I stayed crouched, eyes flicking from the mark to the tree-lean. No movement, no silhouette, but my instincts burned. The same instinct that warns you of a bear you haven't seen yet, or a cougar staring from a branch, silent. "We need extraction now," I said into the radio. "Immediate. Suspect in proximity." 2 minutes out, the pilot replied. 2 minutes. I could work with that. I rose to my feet slowly. Diaz lifted the boy upright, supporting his weight as the rotor wash began to echo faintly in the distance. Then the boy spoke, voice barely audible over the rising wind. "He wants one of you." I felt a chill climb up my spine. Diaz stiffened. "What?" "That's what he kept saying," the boy whispered. "Not both, just one. One is light enough. One won't fall through." "Fall through what?" I asked. The boy swallowed hard. "The ground." I opened my mouth to respond, and then everything happened at once. A figure broke from the tree-lean. Silent, fast, direct. The man. He sprinted toward us. Not wildly, not flailing, but with terrifying precision. Not at the boy, not at Diaz. At me. I drew instantly, weapon raised. "Stop!" He didn't stop. Didn't even hesitate. I shifted stance, ready for physical engagement, ready to tackle, ready to protect the others. But he veered at the last second. Not toward me, past me, straight to the ground where my footprints were deepest. He knelt and slammed his palm onto one of them, hard. The earth shuddered, like something deep beneath the soil flexed. A crack rippled through the ground at my feet, thin but unmistakable. Diaz shouted, pulling the boy farther back. I stumbled, instinctively stepping away from the fracture. The man looked up at me then, eyes wide with something I couldn't interpret. Fear? Triumph? Warning? "You're too heavy," he said quietly. Then he stood and ran straight back into the trees. I moved to pursue, but the crack widened a fraction, the soil shifting dangerously under my boots. Diaz shouted my name. "Callum! Move!" I jumped back onto the rock plate. The ground settled, stable again. But the meaning was clear. The man had tested my weight, and the ground had responded. The helicopter broke through the tree-lean above us, rotor wash blasting needles and dust into the air. Diaz waved them in, and the medic crew jumped out fast, securing the boy, lifting him into the chopper. "Callum, get in!" Diaz yelled, but I shook my head. "We're not leaving him out here." Diaz grabbed my arm. "You can't track him now. You saw what he did. We can't just let him vanish. He's done for the day. He's not coming back out. And if he does, we're not equipped to take him alone." The medic shouted, "We need one ranger on board for escort." Diaz looked at me. "Callum, which one of us goes?" "Not both of you." The message burned in my mind. The man's words, the boy's warning, the marks, the ground, everything pointed to the same conclusion. Only one ranger should leave the basin right now, and only one should stay. I took a breath. Steady, clear. "I'll stay," I said. "Get the boy out." Diaz's eyes widened. "Callum, don't be an idiot." "I'm not. I'm making the only choice that keeps the kid safest. You go." He looked at me like he wanted to argue, but didn't, because he knew I meant it, because he trusted me, because something about this place required a specific response we didn't have a manual for. Diaz climbed into the helicopter. They lifted off. The boy watched me through the open door, eyes full of something like guilt, something like warning. As the chopper banked away, wind blasting across the ridge, I stood alone. When the noise faded and silence returned, I heard it, a voice from the basin, soft, calm. "You chose." I didn't answer. I tightened my pack straps, checked my weapon, and stepped back toward the treeline, because whether or not I wanted this, I was the ranger who stayed, and somewhere down there, in the quiet places where footprints disappear and the soil trembles in precise, deliberate lines, a man was waiting for me, and people don't vanish here for supernatural reasons. They vanish because someone understands the terrain better than we do. Code Black isn't about danger. It's about inevitability. And today I finally understood why.